Welcome to Chopping It Up, a podcast powered by Journey, where we talk about freight, how people got to where they are, and their career journeys, pun intended. All right, let's chop it up. Hello, and welcome to Chopping It Up. My name is Will Jenkins, CEO and founder of Journey, and today I'm joined by Shannon Breen, co-CEO and founder of FreightVana.
Will, thanks for having me, man.
Of course, man. I had the opportunity to meet you in person. I felt like I already knew you because of LinkedIn, but I met you in person at Manifest earlier this year, which is really cool. And it's been really, really great to get to know you the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, look, Manifest has kind of come on the scene pretty fast. I think you've been on the tour like me for many years in your career, and I like the vibe there and good people, and just ran into the hallway and we talked for 10, 15 minutes. That's what I love about this industry, man. Like, you just never know, and you meet people almost now through social before you meet them in person, but not to gas you up on your own show, but nice when the reality matches the social media reality, I'll tell you that.
Dude, I say the exact same, and I love what you and your team do on social. I think it's very unique, and it creates a lot of visibility for your brand. So kudos to y'all and the monster that you're building. So that's what we want to learn about, though. We want to learn about the man behind the machine. So before we dive in, always love to do a fun fact, and then we'll start talking about your personal background. So what you got for us?
Fun fact, I don't like lights. So I'm a big natural light guy. So kids get mad at me at the house on the weekends. They're, turning on the living room light, 1,000 lights on if anybody has kids under the age of 10. And I'm the guy running around like turning them all off because it's not a money thing. It's not a dollars thing. Like, it's just, I grew up in, Southern Oregon in the woods, a lot of windows. I love natural light. In my office, you can't really tell here. Natural light, like, I never turn lights on if I don't have to. So there's your fun fact.
All right. I will keep that one in mind. You would not like my setup right now. I've got some nice bright lights to illuminate the little podcast setup. So it's a little bit different than the natural light. So let's go ahead and get in here, though. So tell me a little bit about growing up. You said in Oregon. Would love to learn a little bit about your background before we dive into the fun FreightVana stuff.
Yeah, my parents, elementary school teachers, man. I grew up on softball fields and sports fields. My dad, dragged me all around, and didn't have to drag me because I loved it, but softball tournaments all over the state, all over California. So I just always grew up watching competition. My dad coached varsity football in our small town I grew up in. So always been around teams, always been around competition. And we moved to Phoenix in 1990. For, good schools, better opportunities. And I've been living in Phoenix for 34 years. So parents are since retired, and I didn't want to go into education. I kind of followed a path of more finance, and worked for some private equity companies, and then made my way to freight in 2012. So that's kind of the background from a familial perspective, and always been on the West Coast too. So I love visiting the East for work, but I always tell people I've never lived east of Arizona, which isn't saying much.
No, there's a lot that is east of Arizona. So let's rewind a bit, man. So you said you were in finance prior to freight. So let's talk like high school age type stuff. What kind of things sparked your interest before you started figuring out that finance was the play, and then eventually into freight?
Yeah, it's funny. So I always want to be an entrepreneur. So now I'm an entrepreneur, but there's a circuitous route that you get back to maybe the things in your life. And so my uncle was a franchisee, and had 3 or 4 or 5 franchises, pretzels, different stuff in like malls. And so there was a time in my life, probably another fun fact, but we're here to talk about it, right? That I almost moved to Plano, Texas to start a pretzel franchise in a mall. Had just graduated college. And the problem is that you don't realize, like, a lot of people that start franchises, even if you get like an SBA loan, people don't realize you still need a downstroke, right? And it's significant, right? You're putting 20, 30% down. Well, when you're 22, your parents are school, I didn't exactly have that. And so I was like trying to cobble together all the leverage to get the down, plus that, plus move. Didn't end up coming to fruition. And so then I transitioned to real estate. Phoenix is a boom market. all of you folks, from Illinois, have to have a place out here at some point in your life.
Course.
That's almost a rite of passage. For all you
snowbird season.
Yeah, for sure. Especially we got the Cubbies out here and all the things in spring training. So it's not a hard sell on many people. So you've got that going. And yeah, man, that didn't come to fruition. So I went into real estate, hobbied around in different stuff, got into finance working for the PE company. And then a friend of mine had just got a great promotion at Night Transportation and was like, man, I could really use you over here. And I was like, dude, I don't know anything about freight. We started talking about opportunities, got my interviews. And next thing you know, Will, I'm sitting in front of a green screen, pounding at the F keys, trying to figure out what deadhead is and dedicated and TONUs and all the terms that all the young folks now join the industry trying to figure out on the fly too. So I started in the summer of 2012 in freight.
Great time to start in freight.
It was good. Yeah. I mean, look, you're coming off of 08, 09, 12, like Knight was a really, established company. But if you're being honest, the brokerage, which where I started and trying to create the connection between that was kind of a redheaded stepchild, probably about $50 million. We're running off a green screen, so let's call it sub-optimized, not connected to the overall org. And so that just gave you a great opportunity to figure out what you wanted to build and learning the business plus figuring out how to optimize it. Like I really felt like that entrepreneurial spirit that I had, like I could really pour it into this thing because it hadn't really been done before. No one was doing it inside the walls of KNX, right? We had this small team that was growing. And so it kind of felt like your own startup inside of a publicly traded, massive trucking company. So I gravitated to the business, I gravitated to the opportunities and certainly the people, which I still, this is my favorite part of the whole thing.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what that first role was. So when you joined Knight, hired on the brokerage side, what was the first function?
First function was basically start ground floor account management. But my other function was we had hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through the machine that was, Knight Transportation, the assets. And there was not a lot of trust or collaboration or partnership with the redheaded stepchild that was the brokerage. And so my first function was, yes, just to learn the business. I got to be an account manager, but at the same time, I was working with the national account directors, the people running the biggest accounts, building that bridge of trust, building some data and analytics so that we had better visibility, trying to kind of build this business like, hey, like we're not as bad as you think we are. It's not us versus them, and really kind of getting those teams to work more symbiotically, right? When I first came in, it was very adversarial. Let's call it that way.
Right. Yeah. So I had a stint with an asset-based brokerage.
Then you know this. You know what I'm talking about, Will.
Yes. So
how did it go?
It's challenging, right? There's always a level of competition, even though we should all be working together to find ways to collaborate and get more business. And it's not always the easiest to go to market cohesively. There are tons of challenges. From the outside, it seems like it might be really easy to execute, but on the inside, it's typically quite chaotic.
You know the worst part? I'll show you the worst part, right? And that's not a knock. I think a lot of folks, especially we've been through a market that we've been through the last 27, 28 months. You're probably counting. I'm sure feeling the count.
Yes.
Worst part, I would say, is while you're building inside those walls that way, you're building these relationships, you're supporting these carriers, you're building up confidence in both the shipper and the carriers that you service. Naturally, that's your job, right? But the overlay, the challenge of those, we get to the deflationary markets where the freight gets really tight. Guess who's the first one to call for all the freight that you'd been supporting? Your own company, right? And so the thing that people don't realize for all the benefits and all the grace is I got a fair amount of phone calls from people that are way up the ladder, let's just say. And the conversation would always be, really appreciate what you've done. All that stuff is going to be going on the asset trucks. And so what ends up happening is you make a lot of phone calls to a lot of partner carriers who you really did consider partner carriers you were working with just like a traditional broker would. Yeah. And then you get to fire them. And you get to fire them at the worst time in the cycle. You get to fire them at the worst time of the year, which probably like the first quarter, maybe some would say in trucking. So you get to be that person. And so for all the benefits, there's also some places that it gets pretty tough, and not tough like tough in general. But now what about all those young folks that you told about relationships, and you told about partnerships, and you told about, building consistency, and then you go tell them, hey, now go fire all those dudes. And then they look you in the eyes and they're like, so what are we building again?
Totally.
So that and I give it to you raw. I don't know if I've ever told that story.
Yeah.
Like, that is the piece. That's the piece that, from the outside, if you've never lived it, you don't know. For if you've lived it, you absolutely know. And something that I quite honestly, in this new world that we're building here, that we call FreightVana, like, I don't have to really live that life. And that is something that's really good about it. That's a positive.
It is. It's certainly helpful to be able to steer the ship, right? You've built an incredible business, and, it's up to you to figure out how you want to orchestrate challenging market cycles and how you want to navigate what those things look like. But the relationships are at the forefront of being able to execute for shippers, especially if you're a freight brokerage and you're not an asset-based trucking organization. You're really only as good as the relationships you have with the drivers that you use. So I want to ask a few questions before we transition into what you've built, you and your team at FreightVana. As you were an account manager, how long did you do that at night?
Oh, well, I was probably 6 months in, and, some promotions, and I was managing a team and then a bigger team. Okay. So probably a couple quarters worth of account management.
So what do you think was the most important lesson you learned in that phase of your time at night that's been impactful as you've been an entrepreneur?
Discipline. Yeah, I'd say my overall thing. I think people look at night, and trucking's commoditized, brokerage commoditized, even now data's commoditized. Some would say tech is quasi commoditized, right?
Yep.
A little bit of the grit, a lot of the grit, right? The Knight family, Kevin and Keith, how they treated people. But I'd say the discipline, right? The difference maker was the discipline, right? They never got out over their skis, knew their cost basis, never got frivolous on any specific item. And hey, that cuts both ways. But at the end of the day, when for years they looked at that brand, they would be like one of the most profitable trucking institutions at size. They just had a discipline and an attitude that was second to none and industry leading. And some, people would benchmark against them because of that discipline. Now, I've tried to carry that on to your question here and say, look, like, we're a broker, we're not a pure asset. Discipline matters. And I think if you and I are being honest, what we've seen over in our industry for the last 5 to 7 years, some of the pain caused by a lack of discipline.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe getting too far out over your skis. So I think how we started, where we started, the lessons learned, for the question you asked, like, that's been it's been a benefit to us as we've scaled in a unique way here.
There's something to be said about a business that's been around for multiple market cycles that has made hundreds of millions of dollars in investments on assets and infrastructure and people, and to have the structure to say, nope, we're not spending that much. I've seen it, been here, done that. There's a lot of companies, unfortunately, that saw a massive uptick during COVID, and now we are on the opposite side of that, and the discipline wasn't there, and unfortunately, they're not in the same position. So it's a hell of a benefit to you to have been able to see that at scale. We're not talking like a small business being disciplined. We're talking a massive organization. Massive.
I mean, look, that was the biggest merger in trucking, in trucking history in 2017. Got a chance to work through that, which was a huge lesson. So, I mean, there's tons of lessons, but I'd say discipline over all things. But even the merger was, an education. I told people you could trade in all of college for that education over a couple of years because you learn so much about yourself, about business.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. When the merger occurred, what were you doing at night? And let's talk about the next couple of years before you broke off to build what you're building.
Yeah. So I mentioned the Genesis point, right? Maybe $50 million, 55 in revenue in 2012. Truth be told, was looking at some opportunities, and, one of the senior leaders at night had kind of said, like, hey, we got some good stuff happening here. Like, I'd definitely think there's opportunities ahead. And I was like, all right, that's cool. And they announced the merger, and you've got months to kind of work through the strategy plan once it's publicly announced. And so got a chance to lead one of the teams that was going to kind of optimize the logistics segment for both orgs. What I didn't know is that I'd end up leading both of them the day after the merger. So it's kind of like, hey, like you're going to help and lead and strategize. And then literally the day after the merger, the person that was running all of Swift Logistics decided that was the end of the road for them, literally the morning of. And by the afternoon, it was like, hey, it's your shooting match. This is your opportunity. Welcome to the show. And so quickly went from, probably close to $200-something million in operation to close to 350, whatever that was. And so immediately overnight, now you had two systems, two teams, and it was all, luckily we had all the preparation, but now you're in the fire, right? And I love it. Like, that's what I'm built for. I love the chaos, and more importantly, really building a bond with the team on the Swift side, right? Because forever we competed. We competed with them like crazy, like anybody would. I mean, you're in I know where you live, right? Like, there's nothing but competition, right? That's what you do, right? You compete, love, fight, whatever with your neighbors. Like, you're in the Mecca, right? Well, in Phoenix, large trucking institutions, I can guarantee you, all we did all day long was, compete versus Knight versus Swift. And then, over a span of a few months, now you're a family. And so I love that opportunity to build that bridge between the talent, kind of everybody kind of put down your swords now, because we're not competing anymore. Now we got to go win together. And so I loved leading the team and the teams through that. That was a great experience for me. And I learned a lot about the business, even more. And I learned a ton about myself, which was really cool too.
What was your first thought when you realized the amount of responsibility you were getting? It was a huge amount of responsibility. The first thought was like, how do you get it all done? Right? Because there's only one of you. And unfortunately, one of those things, and it's the way I'm built, and even here, like, you kind of take on that burden, right, as the captain. And, it was a lot of sleepless nights, if I'm being honest with you. For 2 or 3 months, I don't think I slept more than a few hours a night, because I just have 100 things going on, and I get up and type notes, and here's what we got to do next. And I'm not one of those people that puts anything, like, I'm not very good at compartmentalizing, as in like, oh, like, you're good, like, off to sleep. Like, I don't. And so if something's unsettled in my world, like, I churn on it and I burn on it, and it makes me restless. And so that was a tough time. But my first thought is like, how do you get this all done? How do you bring these together? And also on the Swift side, like, how do you turn it into, a more profitable thing? Because at that time it wasn't doing so well at the time of the merger. And it was coincidentally the redheaded stepchild within the Swift organization. So I'd already ran this rack once, right? And so probably built to run the rack again, since I dealt with it all the way from 12 to 13 to 14 to 15. So walking in 17 is like, I've seen this movie. And I had great support too, right? It wasn't about me. I had great corporate level support and all the things that I needed to be able to move in the way that could get us the results. And so really blessed to have that opportunity to live that one out. Awesome. So let's talk 17 through 21.
Yeah.
You founded FreightVana in 21, correct?
21, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So let's talk about... Oh, go ahead, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, June of 21, we started FreightVana.
Beautiful. So let's talk about those few years managing the merger, the different things you were responsible for, and then the catalyst to go, all right, I'm going to go build a business. Here we go.
Yeah. So after the merger, kind of moved those businesses together. Months later, they liked what we were doing with the people and the change process. So they gave me responsibility for intermodal, which is a sizable business inside the Swift infrastructure, right? You've got 500-600 drivers, 12,000 containers. It's big, right? And so had responsibility for 2 of the 3 reportable segments. I always tell people that was the pinnacle of my corporate career arc, for whatever that's worth. So massive business, right? That's close to $900+ million in responsibility, and hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I think the lesson, if you asked about the lesson, you can do it at scale if you got the right people around. Like, what you realize is that it's not that much more difficult at 50 or 100 than it is at 200 or 300 or 500 or and I guess that until you've been there, until you've been to that altitude, you build it up because it's like, oh, that'd be crazy, that'd be impossible. But like, I think it was so cool to live it out. Like, you love your sports, right?
I sure do.
It's like you don't know. Like, you could talk about the big game, but once you played in the big game, like, you're like, oh, okay, hold on. Like, I built it up to be this thing, and it is a big game, and you get the energy and you get the juices. But once you've played in a couple big games, like, you know what it is, and you're built for it, and you're ready for it, right? Like, I'm a big golfer, and so I always tell people, like, or let's go back to football. This is a great analogy. So you're in football, it's a big game, you're at the top level athlete, you blow your knee out, right? You get hurt. Well, if you get hurt, like, there's thousands of people that want your spot. It's kind of interesting that those people that, like, yes, they're wildly talented, but now they're damaged, they can get back and still go get that same spot that everybody else covets. And I literally think 50% of that is because in their mind, they believe they deserve to have been there. They've been there before. They know what it takes. Like, there's the physical attributes, but it's just they have a mindset that they know that they can play at that level, whereas other
100%.
people still have the doubt.
It's interesting
they've never been there.
I think about, it's so true, right? You think about just stretching a rubber band, for example.
Yeah.
You stretch it, it's not going back to the size it was when it was brand new. It's now elongated, right? That's like your capacity. And so you get all those opportunities throughout your time at night. And then the merger occurs, and now there's more opportunity. You're stretching your capacity. Now you go and you're building an organization. You're stretching your capacity. You're not going back to what you're capable of achieving in 2012 or 15. You're a completely different individual with the capacity to do significantly more, but it's because of what you've been exposed to.
Exactly. And that's why people are like, man, that's wild, like, your growth and this. And it's like, it is, but it isn't, because not only is it me, like, I brought in a bunch of people that know what it's like to live inside a $7, $8, $9 billion transportation infrastructure that moves 50 to 60,000 loads a week. So this game is not bigger than them. They understand it, and they're trying to, like that running back we just talked about, they're trying to get back.
Right.
We want to get back to a level that we have played at, and we got to earn all of that. I wouldn't call this rehab, but you get the idea if we're going to stay with the analogy, right? Yeah. Like, we need to earn our chance to go play at those levels again. And I think you just have a bunch of people that have that belief that, like, oh, we know we can play at that level.
Totally. So let's talk about FreightVana. You said you started the business June of 2021. Talk to me about the group you founded the organization with, and then the reason for the exit from the previous organization and why you wanted to start FreightVana.
Yeah, special group, 24 people, same day. So there's your unique Genesis moment. People tell me, I talk about, I appreciate all the bootstrappers out there. This is not a bootstrapped operation. This was built for one thing, and it was built to get back to the quote unquote league. Let's just keep running the analogy all the way through the pod, but we're built to get back to the league, right? And so in order to do that, the best of the best in a couple different areas that you'd only know to be true, right? Tech, account management, sales, operations, people that I know embodied a certain attitude, a certain spirit, a certain desire that, quite honestly, I had a chance to work next to and with for years and years and years. So when you go out on your own and you're like, I got to build a team, it's like, the type of people that you are willing to put all the chips in with. And this team became that team. And we started with 24 of those folks, and have almost quadrupled since, and have done what we've done. So that's the genesis from the people. The genesis for the why, it's, I think watching guys like you did at your company, and others in the space that were out there doing successful things. And I kind of always wondered, man, I'm doing pretty good, like, from things we're completing, things we're building, but is it the brand, or like, what would it look like externally? And kind of got a chance to watch some of those stories, ruminate and play out with borrowing money and building it this way, and here's our differentiator. And I love the game. And so in my mind, I always just kept thinking, like, what would be a differentiated type of brand? And had the great opportunity after the merger with Swift to build the power only division from the ground up. Literally from its embryonic stages. I was flying back from a FreightWaves conference, and I remember I had my laptop out just hammering this presentation together, because I was like, all right, now's our time, right? We're post-merger. We got all this equipment. and I put an entire like business plan together and cleaned it up. But I remember that flight vividly, and got back and kind of showed that to my boss at the time, who was the CFO. So he definitely could pull the weight, and he was like, all right, let's do this thing. And so he blessed it. The power only division was officially born there. And I learned so much, right? You build it from scratch, you did all that stuff. And so that became a significant component in my mind as I thought about a differentiated logistics company in the future. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could build it from the ground up? Right. You could have trailers, you could have technology, you could build it with a certain type of team. I was like, I bet people would mess with that. Like, I bet people would put that into their Rolodex. I bet that could be differentiated from the traditional and the traditional. Like, can you be untraditional in the middle? And that became just this burning passion of like, oh, I think it's true. And then had some side conversations with friends that worked at shippers, and they're like, oh yeah, I'd like that. I'd like to see that. And like, it's not, trailers aren't a new thing, right? Right. Just like trucks weren't a new thing, just like all that. But there's still all kinds of different brands and different ways that people deploy them and use them and strategize around them. And so I was like, I think we can do some really cool stuff with trailers. And that's what we've done ever since we started.
I like it. So let's talk 10,000 foot overview of FreightVana. If I am someone not familiar with the space, give me the quick rundown on you all and what y'all do.
Yeah, I'd say we identify as a freight broker, but we're still much different. So we have a brokerage MC, like so many, 20,000 plus. But what sets us apart, you got your traditional asset providers that, have their drivers and trucks. You've got your brokers that typically are non-asset, and they call them non-asset because they typically have their brick and mortar and their tech, but that's where they invest the most in. And so we're kind of amalgamation of both. We've got the tech, certainly got the people, but we've also invested heavily in this trailer pool to be able to unlock some of that drop and hook capacity, which makes up, I don't know, like hundreds of billions of dollars in freight that flows that typically is dominated by the mid to large asset players in the country. And so for us, we use our brokerage capabilities. We marry that up with our equipment, which is state of the art. And we deliver an experience that is pretty unique and differentiated for those that are used to a broker being a broker and an asset being an asset. And as those worlds converge, we are certifiably trying to be a leader in that power only category.
That's awesome, man. In terms of types of equipment, trailer wise, is it dry and others, refrigerated, anything else, or is it primarily one or the other?
Primarily just dry van right now. Yeah, we started in dry van, grown our fleet in dry van. Many discussions on the refrigerated front. Mm-hmm. Problem, as you know, Will, because you're a super pro, like the amount of drop needs there is in refrigerated is much different. Yeah. The liability and the equipment cost is much higher. Yeah. So for all those reasons, that'd be a tough place to start. I wouldn't say we wouldn't get there, and we are in discussions with a few folks, which is cool to have discussions about what the future might look like. That's a different economic build, and something that I think fits the dry van space a lot more, especially for our first few innings here.
Totally. So let's talk about first year of FreightVana, because I want to peel back layers and hear origin story, good, bad, the ugly, the fun. I know what it's like to build at that level. So first year, you got 24 people, you got the capital to be able to build this monster the way you want to. What's that first year like? Give us the rundown.
Well, let's talk about the first 2 months.
Okay.
Let's talk about taking super pros. Now, I'd already had time to desensitize from, corporate and the rigor, because I went out and business building and fundraising. And so I had a gap. Now imagine these people all walk in the doors on June 2nd of 21, high powered pros, leaders, good operators, technologists, and everybody kind of walks in, you do the meet and greets. And then what? Because we don't have any loads.
What do we do?
We don't have a TMS. We don't have any customers. It was an amazing, it was like watching, and it was so entertaining for me to watch. Like we're fine, right? It's part of the plan, but it's like for 2 months, you watch people just struggle with their desensitization because they're like, wait, I don't have hundreds of people. I don't have thousands of loads. Like, what are we doing? Like, you know what I mean? So people just struggle like in this level of uncomfortableness for months, right? It took us like 2 months to take our first load. And I remember just fun, like our first load actually got booked by a guy I just absolutely love, Guillermo Kihi. And he was on vacation, literally out of the country with his laptop. Wow. And booked our first load. And everyone was, we had a couple loads that fell through that were supposed to be our first load. And we were just living and dying with this one customer. Was like, oh, yeah. Oh, nope. I had to cancel those, which you know it well. But hey, you work in the infrastructure you used to. You cancel a load. Done. We're moving on. Like, who cares? Yeah. When you've never had a load, like every load matters. And so every cancellation, the whole floor, like, no, this is like a wild ass trading floor for one, $600 local, like California load, because like, it was so pure though, bro. It was so pure because I loved it, because one of the things that gets lost at scale is that love and purity.
Totally.
And so seeing it at a one load level again was like, dude, I freaking love this. I love it, win or lose. I love the feel of feeling it.
There's something special about being in at the ground level when every shipment matters, every phone call you make matters, all of the people contributing matter, and the passion and intensity you cannot replicate. Looking back even now, right, you're going on, this is 3.5 going on to 4 years of building this business. There's still passion, but that first year when things are like wildly uncertain and people are looking at each other like, did I leave? I left a really good place to build something I'm uncertain about. When things start working, there's just a different level of joy that is kind of hard to replicate.
I think impossible to replicate. Impossible to replicate at scale, certainly in publicly. I mean, it just happens, right? You get so big, like we just talked about that one load. You never forget it. How many loads got canceled? And I mean, you've canceled hundreds of. You wouldn't be able to recite a single thing about them, but it's just the word is purity, man. The purity of it all. And then look, you know the deal too. Like that's why I love every time we connect, because you've been on the journey, right? Plug.
Yes.
That one's free. The next one is invoiced. But
all right. I love it.
But in all seriousness, you've been there, you've done it. And what's so cool is when you chart your course, and sometimes like anything else, you kind of forget even along the way. And you just always remind yourself of the milestones and where you're hitting. As we've been one of the fastest growing companies in the country, it is awesome when we pull ourselves out and say, hey, just a reminder, like 1 year ago, here's what it looked like. And people are like, hey, okay, right? Because when you're going through it, it gets neutralized. We're just humans, right? That's what we do. Totally. And so I do a really good job of kind of trying to zoom back the camera for our team every once in a while and be like, hey, look where we were, look where we're at, look where we're going, right? And they're like, okay, all right. It re-engages people like, okay, so while we go through the fog, let's not forget, like we are doing something wildly special here.
That's a golden piece of advice, because it's really easy to get desensitized to the level of growth and the amount of work that you're putting in, because that's your expectation. You're used to producing, and you expect to produce at a particular clip. And when you do it, you're like, thumbs up, that's what I was supposed to do. And you put your head back down, you keep doing it. But you're doing yourself a disservice by not zooming out to appreciate that moment, because this is the first time you've built your own business, right? With these like incredible group of people. This will never be done again. Not FreightVana. It's the first. So I'm glad to hear that, because it's important to appreciate those moments.
Well, and even in the dark ones, right? So asked about the wins and the lot. Like, look, you if anybody thinks, and I think we do a pretty good job of keeping it real on social. We have fun. We certainly aren't buttoned up. There's no buttoned up, I think, in the way we show up, but it's authentic, right? I hope people see that. And look, I think the way people show us love from around the industry is because of that authenticity, a little bit of goofiness. It's just something that people vibe with, because look, in big companies, corporate America, I would say, it's got to be buttoned up. It's got to be buttoned up. And so one of the things to chart this course was like, you know what? Let's just have fun. Let's just have fun.
Love.
Let's just have fun. Because look, these people, I spend as much time, I hate to say it, but the truth is we spend more time together than we do with our families.
Right.
The sad reality, but a reality. And so guess what? I am unwilling to commit that time, nor would I ask anybody out there to commit their time if we ain't going to have fun We ain't gonna have laughs. We can't make jokes. Like they can't jab at me, make some jokes. Like I'm down for whatever, right? And so what you see is what you get. And look, for us, it has worked. Maybe for other people, they like it a different way. For us, I particularly love it because that's how I want to live my life.
If you're going to spend as much time there, you might as well enjoy it. And it's very clear based on the way that you all represent yourselves in the market, yourself, the rest of the people you're building the business with, the brand itself, very, very authentic. And I love it. I think a lot of people, it really resonates based on the way that you all represent the biz.
Thanks, man. And if you're doing it right, you shouldn't have to try, right?
Totally. So let's talk about turning points, things that started to give you and the team those fantastic glimmers of hope. Like, okay, this is a real thing. Customers are listening. Carriers like what we got going on. Give me a couple of moments over the last few years, as early or as recent as you'd like.
I think, look, I would tell you this, customer engagement, something I've never seen. Now, admittedly, I never did sales in a prior life. I was running a business unit, was underneath, running business units, but you had a layer of sales.
Yep.
So I know sales is near and dear to your heart on your journey.
Yeah.
That's the second one. That one's charged.
The invoice is on the way.
I had to make up for the time here. This can't work for free. Point being, I never was really in sales, but we're always selling. And I know that's a mantra I've heard you say. I've watched a lot of your work. It's like everybody's selling. Like you don't have to be in sales to be selling. Everybody's selling. So here you really had to sell. And I had some partners and some shipping partners that even despite the market falling was like, man, I want to invest in something different. And you know what? The other cool part is they also want to invest in something that's has that same level of purity and passion to it. Because they get a little desensitized with the same spiel. And I've got 20,000 carriers. No, Will, not 20. I've got 30. Oh, Will, I've got 35. And none of them care. Right, that number, like people love to sell that. No one really cares, right? That's not even the question to ask if you really wanted to ask a great question. So It's like that spiel gets so tired, and so you show up very authentically. You show up. Here's what we're going to do differently. Here's how we're investing with these trailers. Here's how my team's built. You give us a shot. We don't drop the ball. Wouldn't say we've never dropped the ball. That's ridiculous. We're moving, tens of thousands of loads a year. Like balls get dropped.
Right.
But directionally, my team's a bunch of badasses. We have a passion for it. We hold each other accountable in a cool way. So the coolest thing I would tell you, and I won't cite statistics, but from a customer acquisition perspective, in the face of a nothing but a recession, right? Because in February of 22, we just started to fall off and we haven't stopped, or maybe we've hit bottoms or whatever you want to call it. Customers have been very interested in saying like, hey, I'm interested in something different. I'm interested in your transparency. I'm interested in your trailers. And I love the passion of your team. I'll give you a shot. And that's been the coolest part. So I think the most surprising thing is to have the ambition and the dream of the thing being something that people would buy into. And time after time after time and referral after referral after referral, the shippers are voting with their feet saying, hey, like we're not talking single source when we show up. But you want a rookie contract? I'll get you a rookie contract. Like, I'd love to see what you guys can do. And look, I'm looking for good partners. And as we get to this market, we've gotten bigger and bigger, and the brand's getting bigger and bigger. Our trailer network's getting bigger and bigger. Shippers are looking at a potential problem that might get bigger and bigger in an inflationary market. So they're trying to align with people that they feel like will be there for them and show up the right way. And we're trying to be that team and have been ever since. So.
That's awesome, man. It's always cool when you start to get votes of confidence externally, because I don't care who you are. I don't care how much confidence and bravado you have. When you start something from scratch and nobody's paying you a darn thing and you need to go pound the pavement to get people to buy in, it gets dark some days. It is not roses and butterflies. And when people start going, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more. Sometimes that's all you need to go, yep, keep pushing. Got to keep pushing.
It is. And there's amazing stories. We just had an amazing milestone on one of those stories, right? I was in your town and sitting in a room, 140 of the biggest, largest trucking companies and all that sitting in that same room. Go. And, a little known company by the name of Ace Hardware, did awards for the first time. for the first time they ever did awards.
Yeah.
And once you know, this little startup out of Phoenix with all that dream and all that ambition, right, in front of 120 of your largest peers, just rattles off your stats and then says, hey, like, oh, and FreightVana, 2024 carrier of the year. Incredible. And like, I literally got chills just saying it out of my mouth right now. Like, that's how special it was. An amalgamation, to your point, of all those dark days, all that doubt, all that stuff. And not that you're done, but what a cool milestone to be able to be like a little bit of validation through all the fire. And I hope that everybody gets a chance to taste that and feel that, because Andrew and I walked out of that meeting, set up an impromptu Teams meeting, right, my man? And next thing you know, we got 20, 40, 30 people on the line. And I gassed it up a little bit. And I think I said we got kicked out of the network or something. And everyone's just like shock and awe, right? Because I was just effing. And then I was like, nah, just kidding. We got carried. And then everybody went crazy, right?
That's awesome.
And those are the moments, man. I talked to Andrew Silver about it. Like, he never, you don't forget about your first, and he remembers his vividly. And I would tell you, that for me was, I will be decades. I won't be moving any freight. I don't know what the life has for me, but those moments I will never, ever forget. It was a lot of hard work and really, really special.
That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations. That's quite the honor, and obviously a testament to the work that y'all have done.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Of course, of course. So let's talk challenges and what you've learned as an entrepreneur. What are some things that you've learned the last 4 years, challenges that have come up, and what you've been able to take from them as a leader?
Oh, man. I mean, so many challenges, right? You have the best intentions for plans. I just say planning in general. You think things are going to work a certain way. I would say from an entrepreneurial perspective, what's really challenging is to understand the vast diversity of things that you have to get educated on. I mean, because I realized, like, my corporate experience, like, I'm running real estate. You're running, like, real estate is a certain thing, but I didn't have like full teams. Like, I was a pretty solopreneur, right?
Right.
Then I go work in, finance. You got teams and all groups of people. Then you've got publicly traded. So you got teams and divisions doing all these things. And even in my head, you don't process like all the different various components that are supporting you. You should, and you're not like, oh man, that's totally shocking. But what you don't realize is like every single one of those increments, you need that to deliver, or else you don't have HR, you don't have benefits, you don't have insurance, you don't have credit. You're like, I remember, dude, I was laughing because when we first started, we didn't have the blue check mark.
Right.
Why would we?
Deal.
Hey, why would we? And they're like, well, yeah, you don't have the credit. And I was like, credit? Like, I was like literally laughing in my office. And I'm like, things you don't think about when you start over, because you're working for we don't talk about credit. No. We don't talk about drop approvals at Walmart. Wait, what's that? What are you talking about? I got a drop approval. I was like, I never in my life. What is this thing you speak of? Right? Like these things start coming at you. You're like, this is, and so I just loved it. Like, you have to embrace it, but like all of those hurdles, and they're just coming from all these places, because from the ground up, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the history, you ain't earned those stripes, and you just don't see those things come. And that comes through a door on a Tuesday or this, and so you just got to be able to take whatever comes through the door at you.
Oh, yeah. Those are very key. It's super important, how you respond to them, because they are going to keep rolling in. There's nothing more constant than change and a little bit of adversity, and how you handle it is typically more important than what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, most recently, like, look, people, right? People are going to come in. If you've built a brand like ours in the way we've built it, forward facing social media, like, look, the people on your team are really sought after, right? And I think that's a great thing, right? I think, going back to our football analogy, if you're building great teams and doing good things, like, people are going to want a little bit of that on their team. And so, look, like anything, you have attrition, right? And in your head, when you start, you're like, everybody together forever. And like, really quickly, you realize, like, it ain't going to be like that. You'll have certain bonds and certain people will move. And that's honestly part of it. And it's a sick and twisted experience to be like, man, that stinks. Have a little bit of regret. What could I have done different? Because you're human.
Right.
I don't get to live this out. But at the same time, I'm really happy for them. And in a sick way, I'm really doing a good job, because like this platform and hopefully my leadership has helped them go achieve this thing. And that becomes an interesting, I wouldn't even say a dilemma, just something that you process in your mind as you go through it. And you gotta like kind of welcome it. Like, man, if like I continue on this path, like this is a great place for people to propel their careers.
It is. I actually think it's an honor because you're building something that other people deem to be valuable, and you're building it with incredible people who have the opportunity to continue or go find, something that they think is the right fit for them. And it's like, if you were able to be here doing something together and it was fruitful for both of us for the time being, man, I'm all for it. There's nothing better than that, because they can take those things and perpetuate it in the future, but still leave a massive impact. And what you all were able to do together was, obviously monumental. So it's cool to see that. It's good to see your team go succeed.
I'll leave you with one more thing, and people will call this, and I get it, it's the long game, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur and, while you're going through it, I think, people can debate it or whatever it is, but the level, you hit it earlier in our chat, the fulfillment level is unlike any other. So at this point in my career, I make less money than I've ever made in a long time. And I've never been happier because that fulfillment level, because of that dream, because of all the components we've talked about together today. It's like, so finding that thing that really fulfills you, I just am such a believer, is so much more powerful than whatever that paycheck is every other week. It's important. You got to take care of your life. You got to be able to set yourself up. But man, to do that and not have the fulfillment, no thanks. Like, never a chance. I would never go back to any single thing that I wasn't fulfilled doing, because it just would feel so empty knowing what's possible and what like I'm doing today. It's like a non-negotiable. I'll put it to you that way.
I love that. I think that's a fantastic place to get ready to wrap up. Before we close here, anything upcoming for us to be on the lookout for from the team?
Big things. You got a chance to meet, look, we're starting to be a haven for some of the best talent in the industry. You met Jody recently, right? Yep. She's an absolute pro. She's moving to Phoenix to start the year. We're growing out our sales team nationally, which is exciting. We've got Alex Perry, who, has joined our team running our, a VP of pricing and network. We've got some people that are really interested in joining us on this ride from an investment perspective, which I particularly love because I know what's possible. And so, look, just a lot more investment, a lot more creativity for us as we scale. I hope the market for our partners, especially on the carrier side, we get to a better part of equilibrium, because like us fighting for every inch, those folks are fighting for every inch and like don't have a lot of the benefits, and we're trying to be the best partner for them, but it's just not sustainable at some levels. So I really hope that as an industry, we find equilibrium where like a lot more people can thrive. We're just been part of that cycle where it's tough. So look, we've got our eyes on that. I won't be Nostradamus. If both of us could figure out when the freight markets would turn, I don't even know if we'd be doing podcasts. We might be talking about that, but
correct.
We'd be doing really, really, really well. So, but we don't know that. But look, hopefully find some equilibrium, more investing, definitely more social, continue to build the brand. And look, hopefully do it in a way that we don't lose sight of all those things that you and I just talked about. Like, that's the mission. Like, how do you keep that level of integrity and authenticity as you grow something? That's my burning ambition. So as long as I'm here, that's what we're going to focus on doing.
That's awesome, man. It's really cool to see where you're building. You mentioned Jody. I had an opportunity to work with her back in the day at Coyote. She's incredible. So you're building quite the team around you. It's really, really cool to watch, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you closer. As we get ready to wrap up here, best places for people to reach out if they want to be in contact with you or the FreightVana team?
LinkedIn's definitely our spot, right? I mean, follow us at FreightVana. You have so many great followers. If you don't know about us, man, follow along. Give us a thumbs up. Follow us on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. We're on all those places. Got my handles and stuff too. So reach out, shoot a message. I'm always down to like answer questions, help people out too. And if people are in Phoenix, man, we have so many cool people, competitors, competition, whatever it is, come through and see us. We're right here in kind of Midtown Phoenix, 15 minutes from the airport. So would love to have anybody stop by and say hi and grab some swag if you want to come visit. So we'll probably owe you some swag at this point. I don't even know.
I don't have any. We got to do an exchange. I've got some good stuff for you as well.
All right. We'll exchange offline. I love that.
Yeah. Awesome, man. And I forgot to ask, favorite book. This is one that we always close with. You got a favorite book?
I do. I love Grit. I love the science
Great one.
of grit. I think it's just so pure. We talk about it. Can you build it? Is it coached? How do the best teams built? As leaders, as you know, what you do, recruiting, like, look, you're trying to assess that one thing.
Oh yeah.
Because you could tell me anything, you write anything you want on a paper, but like, what do you have? Like, what's built to win in you? Is it built in you? Like, you know, nature versus nurture. I love the science of it because I think that is a testament to trying to figure out like separating the winners from the losers. So I just love that book.
Yeah, great book, man. I really, really appreciate the time. It was incredible to hear more about the origin story and your background. Look forward to seeing you and the FreightVana team continue to crush it. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the support, man. Love it.
Of course, of course. All right, see you.